Hey everyone, it's 8-Bit Flashback back again, and as some of you may know, I've got a serious addiction to modding these little tiny consoles, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. I've been modding these with Raspberry Pi Zeros, Raspberry Pi 3s, etc. But for this little guy, I decided to do something different. I put the guts of an Android TV box inside this, and it's running Android 6.0, and it turned out pretty cool. Let's go and take a closer look. So here's a look at the original Nintendo Entertainment System from 1985. It's pretty big. And here's a look at the Nintendo Classic Edition replica that I just got done modding. And of course, one of the mods I did was to make the lid open just like the original NES. And in addition to making the lid open, I also have a mini NES cartridge that functions. So this is the original Rad Racer cartridge, and here's a look at my mini Rad Racer cartridge. So we're going to go ahead and load the cartridge in the original NES, so it sticks in there. So the original Nintendos had a terrible loading system. I just recently tested this machine and it took me 15 tries to load Rad Racer. If you had one of these as a kid, you did a lot of praying, a lot of blowing on the cartridge, all kinds of tricks to make it work. But for my mini NES cartridge, it just loads straight in there and it works the first try. But I was thinking of modifying it to where you had to blow in it at least once to make it work. So here's a look at the NES Classic Edition replica, and I bought a couple of these just for modding, and they look very close to the original. They even come with original packaging and working games. The main difference is the hardware inside them. So this is the exact console I modded, so let's go ahead and compare these two, and I'll show you all the differences in them. So the NES Classic Edition sadly does not have a functioning lid, but to me, it's a must. You gotta have a functioning lid, right? I also had to modify the power button so it turns off the Android TV box that's inside this. And for the controller ports, I installed two USB inputs, and I got them to fit in there nice and snug. So here's an up-close look at the USB ports, and here's a look at the original controller ports. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back of these. So on the original, all I had was an HDMI input and a power input. On the modded console here, I got an Ethernet port, an HDMI port, an AV out port, and a power port. Another must-have for me is the mini NES cartridges. These really bring back a nostalgic feeling of when I had the original NES. Even though I have an original NES, the mini Classic Edition is just not complete without these little cartridges. So here's a look at what's inside the original NES cartridge. It's got a fairly large circuit board. And inside mine, I got a tiny flash drive installed in it. But instead of just having one game, I can literally have thousands of games on just this one cartridge. So on the inside of my mini NES, I have a cartridge slot with a female USB input. I even added a plastic cover on the inside to cover all the electronics, that way when you open the lid you don't see all that circuitry. And I designed the cartridge slot to where the games load nice and easy without any trouble. Maybe it's just me, but I have a lot of fun just putting the cartridge in and taking it out, without even playing a game. I know, that's kind of weird. Okay, it's time to talk about what's on the inside of this. So here's what we got on the inside of this. This is an Android TV box running Android 6.0. It's got Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, 3 USB ports, an Ethernet port, an HDMI out, an AV out. It's got a 64-bit CPU, it's got 4K capabilities, and also has an SD card slot. I picked this up on eBay for about 35 bucks. And as you can see here, it's just small enough to where the parts from this can fit inside the NES Mini. Okay, let's go ahead and walk through the build process a little bit here. First thing I did is I took apart the case, and here's a look at what's going on inside of it. I figured the board would be kind of rectangular shaped like a Raspberry Pi 3. I was actually kind of surprised to see it was L-shaped. Because of the shape of it, it almost didn't fit inside the NES Classic, but it does fit this direction right here. It'd be really nice if all I had to do was just drop it in there and it worked, but I had to do quite a few modifications to make this console work. For my controller ports, I had to make my own USB extensions, and it had to be really compact so they could fit inside the case. Here's a look at the NES Classic power buttons. These had to be soldered into the Android circuit board. And here's a look at the final placement of the Android circuit board, along with those USB extension cables I made. Then I made a nice cover to cover everything so when you open that lid you don't see a circuit board mess. Then I carefully measured and marked all my port holes for my Ethernet, my HDMI, my AV out, and my power out. To cut all these holes, I used a very small Dremel. And I started off by undercutting the holes and kept cutting away at them until I had the fitment just right. And for the bottom half, I had to do a little bit of bodywork to cover those old holes. And here's a look at the Dremel and the bit I used to make my cuts for the lid to make it functional. And here's a look at the hinges I made to make that door open and close. The hinges had to be very small and compact so they wouldn't interfere with anything else. And here's a look at the cartridge slot I made for loading the games. And there's quite a few other modifications I did, but this is just kind of a quick overview of how I built the console. So this console still isn't perfect, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So let's talk about those mini cartridges a little bit more. So I actually have two different types of cartridges. I have one cartridge that has a USB flash drive inside of it, and that's that Rad Racer cartridge. And then the Mario Brothers cartridge is actually an NFC cartridge. It has an NFC tag inside of it, and you can load games that way. I'm not really going to cover the NFC cartridge on this video, but I will cover that in a future video. For controllers, I have this wireless keyboard / gamepad with mouse support. Then I also have a Logitech wireless gamepad. So for the power button, I actually have two LED lights. When the machine's off, it glows red. And when you power it on, it turns blue. So I'm going to go ahead and push the power button again, and it'll shut down Android just like it's supposed to. Okay, let's go ahead and turn it back on, and here's a look at my custom intro I made for my Android Nintendo. Nintendo, now you're playing with power. Android power. So it boots up pretty fast. As soon as that intro's over, it's right at the main screen. Here's a look at the home screen, and I have a custom theme installed. So the home screen that comes with these are quite a bit different. Here's how the home screen looked originally. It's nice looking, but it doesn't really work if I want this to be a Nintendo console. So we have Rad Racer that's on the far left that's loaded and ready to play. Then we have what appears to be more games, but these are actually front-end apps that link your emulators and games together. So Mario Bros. 1 is RetroArch, Mario Bros. 2 is Rom Flicks, and Mario Bros. 3 is Arc Browser. So each of these have a custom icon, so it has more of a Nintendo feel. So let's go ahead and load Rad Racer and test this out. Now this is stored on the NES cartridge, so if I remove the cartridge, this game will not work. So Rad Racer was always a cool game, but it was kind of made famous from that movie The Wizard with Fred Savage. There's a scene where he walks in and Lucas is playing Rad Racer and he puts the power glove on and he's driving the car with it. It looked awesome. The power glove looks really cool. But unfortunately in reality, the power glove doesn't work very good at all. It's kind of a piece of crap. There's even a 3D mode on Rad Racer which I've never tried. One of these days I need to get a pair of 3D glasses and try it out. So I'm going to go ahead and exit the game. You can either use your mouse pad and cursor to navigate around, or you can just use a regular controller. So I have quite a few other apps installed in here. Let's go through some of the other apps. We got ES File Explorer, that's kind of a must-have for modding. We got the Google Play Store, we got Google, we got YouTube, Music, App Freezer, Update Settings, and that App Freezer app's a very handy app for me. If there are certain apps that I don't want to run, I can just freeze those apps and it works really well. So the Android TV boxes kind of turn your TV into a tablet. So if you're familiar with Android, then you'll get the hang of this pretty easy. We also have the Chrome browser, Netflix, Kodi, VLC Media Player, Gmail, Miracast, and Miracast is a really cool app. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And besides these apps, you can download whatever apps you want via Google Play. Okay, it's time to check out some more games. Let's go ahead and load RetroArch. And in RetroArch, I'm running the XMB theme that's very similar to the PS3 menu layout. RetroArch is a very solid app. If you're going to be doing any retro gaming on Android, I definitely recommend you get this app. And again, all the games that are on here are actually stored on that mini NES cartridge. Here's a look at my NES games, and this is the original 30 games that came out for the NES Classic Edition. And I'm not limited to just 30 games. I can load as many games as I want. I just chose to put those 30 games on here to give it more of an original feeling. And for previews, you can choose box art, you can also choose gameplay snaps, and you can also choose title snaps. Okay, let's go ahead and load a game here. Let's pick Gradius. Probably not pronouncing it right, but whatever. We're going to select the NES Famicom from my emulator and go ahead and run it. So as you can see there, I have overlays on the side there. So it keeps the proper screen aspect, but instead of having black bars on the side, you have those overlays to give it kind of a nicer look. This is actually a really addicting game. I can see why they picked this as one of the 30 game titles. So let's go ahead and exit the game, and there's a lot of different options you can choose. You can save the game, you can take screenshots, so I'm going to go ahead and save the game. So that's going to go ahead and save it from the point I was just playing, and then we can resume from that point. There's also control options and cheat options. Then I also have some Super Nintendo games that set up the same way. And I got some Atari games. And there's a lot of other options with RetroArch that I haven't even explored, such as Network Play and many other things. So I'm not just limited to the 3 systems I have on here. There's a lot of other emulators I can load too, such as 3DO, arcade emulators, Atari Jaguar, Atari Lynx, Game Boy, Neo Geo, Nintendo 64, PC Engine, Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, Sega Saturn, and much more. Okay, let's go ahead and exit RetroArch and load another front end. This is called Rom Flicks. So for emulators, we have the Atari 2600, the Atari 7800, the Atari Lynx. Then of course we have Nintendo. Then we have Super Nintendo, the Famicom, Nintendo 64, Mega Drive, Mega Drive Japan, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Neo Geo Pocket, Neo Geo Pocket Color, Game Gear, Arcade, and PSP Mini. So I'm going to go ahead and select Nintendo, and for the games we have the box art and the game title. And if you select a game, it gives you a game description, and then on the right side here it's supposed to give you a video preview. But I haven't figured out how to make the video snaps work yet. Once I get that figured out, I'll give you an update. So let's go ahead and load this game and check it out. And this is a game that I never even tried as a kid. The first time I played this, I was in my 20s, which that was probably a good thing because I was already playing too many games as it was when I was a kid. There's just way too many good games to choose from. You just can't play them all. There's also a lot of different options for how you can view your games. Let's go ahead and select a different one. This one's called Panel Details. And there's quite a few other options to choose from. You could probably spend days just going through all the settings. And in Settings under the Tool tab, you can download emulators and download artwork for a lot of different consoles. So Rom Flicks is very cool and it's off to a good start, but it could definitely use some updates. It's not quite a solid app yet. Not everything works 100%. Okay, it's time to load the Arc browser front end. And this is a pretty solid app. I do like this app. It's kind of simplistic, but that's a good thing in my opinion. So we got some Atari 2600 games with some box art and some screenshots there in the background. Same thing for the Atari Lynx and the Game Boy Color. And for the NES, I have the complete collection of 792 games. Then we have the Nintendo 64. We got a couple good games on here. The Sega Genesis, the Super Nintendo, and one of my favorites, the TurboGrafx 16. And besides having just these emulators, Arc Browser is compatible with a lot of different emulators. There's a lot of ones you can choose from. But what I haven't seen yet is a good working Sega Saturn emulator. Is that ever going to happen? Alright, let's try it on a Nintendo 64 game. This is GoldenEye 007. This was an extremely popular game back in the day. So I actually have the game saved, so it should start me right where I left off. The 4-player deathmatch mode on this game really set it apart from other games at that time. It had very smooth and slick control, and a lot of other first-person shooters from that time just couldn't compare. Oh, well, I guess I'm dead. And I guess I get to see it again. And again. And one more time. Thanks Nintendo for showing that replay of how bad I really did. Another cool feature about the Arc browser is on the game selection screen, there's an option to select YouTube, and when you select that, it searches YouTube for that game title name, so you can watch related videos to your game. And on a side note, I got a custom Mario keyboard installed on my console. Okay, it's time to go ahead and check out the Miracast app, and what this does is it allows one Android device to mirror its screen to another Android device. For this test, I'm going to mirror my phone to the Android Nintendo. This is a very cool and handy app. One use I have for it is if I'm watching a video on my phone and I want to share it with everyone else in the room, I can use the Miracast option so everyone can see it on the big TV. Okay everyone, thanks for watching. This is 8-Bit Flashback. If you want to hear more from me, please like and subscribe. And if you want to see more of my videos, just click any of these links.